Hi everyone, Robert Clickybeard here, the CEO of Wilson 360. We're starting to let people in here. So good to see some recognized faces or names. Pam Hill, welcome. Brian, welcome. We have Sheila, our renowned speaker here. So she'll be speaking here shortly. Chuck, glad to see you on. Who else do I recognize? Nicholas with Robot. Bridget, great to see you again. So we're going to give a few more minutes here to let people come in. But I appreciate you all joining us today and listening to Sheila's words of wisdom.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your new business venture.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I was just talking with Robert about it earlier today that I'm equal parts excited and terrified, but I'm going for it.
Good feeling, right?
It is. It is. Thank you.
Yeah. Exciting.
Yeah. And as we go through this, I know Sheila will say the same thing, but just encourage you to put your questions, comments in the chat, or if you're bold enough, you can also come off camera and mic and ask your question as well. So we'll give it another, let's see, we're at 3 past the hour. We'll give it another minute and kick everything off. Tim Lake, glad you could join us here. We've got Willard to help set this up. So thank you, Willard. Really appreciate you introducing us to Sheila. So we've got people here. I know we've got people here from Arizona. What other states do we have on the call here? Maybe just throw that into chat just to see how much outreach we have. So just throw the state you're in the chat while we wait for a couple more people to join us. We've got Florida, we've got Georgia, South Carolina, great place, South Carolina, Colorado. I know we've got a couple people from Arizona here. Illinois via Colorado. Good to see you, Brian. We've got another person from Arizona here. So well represented in Arizona. It's awesome. I love it. They're all inside because it's too hot outside.
Already.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I believe it hit 100 this week.
Oh.
Okay, well let's kick things off here. So just go through a couple of slides. So obviously we have Sheila Matthews, founder of Culture Pro LLC. She's going to be talking about trying to get that healthier conversation, stronger relationship. So really excited to hear what Sheila has to say today. Going to the next slide, Arvin. So this is just a reminder of all the services that Wilson 360 offers. As you could see here, front and center is clients. So obviously the client, our clients are the most important thing to us. And then we'll provide whatever services they need to grow, to scale. Maybe there's eventual exit. Maybe there's just some challenges in here. And I know Sheila will be helping us on the HR side as well, and the communications and just helping manage people and overall biggest part of our business. Next slide. The same thing. These are all the different, we have the Wilson 360 Plus. This is a new community program where we're offering people who just want to join our community, get access to content, webinars like this, things like benchmarking. So 360 Plus, check it out on our website or use the QR code here, but great way just to join a community and just rub shoulders with some of our elite peer group members, and then they become first in line when we do have a peer group offering open up. Going on to the next slide. So here's our annual event. This will be year number 4 for us. It's in Denver. July 29th to 31st. We've got some amazing speakers coming up, talking about people, talking about transition plans, so many great speakers coming along. So it'll start roughly mid-afternoon on the 29th and finish around about midday on the 31st. There's also some fun. You get to hang out in a beautiful hotel, the Four Seasons. We have some discounted pricing. So before it ends up, I think, roughly the end of the month. So it is open now, as Pam mentioned. So check out the QR code, check out our website, and hopefully we'll see everybody on the call today. Join us in Denver. And next slide. So Shelia, built-in hired acquisition.com team, serves as a people CME, so SME for all portfolio companies, created the talent playbook for Audix. I think I said that right. It's a private equity portfolio, $15 billion company. Helped automate peak season hiring processes at UPS. I can't believe this number, Shelia. Hiring 400,000 people in 3 months. That just seems unbelievable to me. Saved UPS millions of dollars, specifically 3.4 million, by improving, modernizing the training programs. I think that a lot of companies, especially in the landscape industry, struggle with that training programs, trying to get that implemented. And then helped hundreds of founders solve business constraints, mindset resets, and face the hard truths. Fun fact, I'm so honest, it gets me into trouble. So here's your prompt to ask Shelia some bold questions.
That's right. No filter.
So thank you, Shelia, for joining us today. I will pass you on to Shelia. She's got some slides to share.
Sure. All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name's Shelia. Robert, thank you so much for the warm introduction. I really appreciate it. I was asked to give a talk today about tough talks. Tough talks, hard conversations. I jokingly tell people now that my friends have always told me I had a black belt in keeping it real, and I've been fortunate to turn it into a position. And served me well over my career, but also got me into trouble a few times. But I was actually going to share my background. I don't need to do that because Robert did a great job. And all of the experiences that I've had, whether it was at Audix, UPS, or acquisition.com, where I worked with a ton of business owners and founders, have really led me in the direction of doing my own thing for a little while. So I recently started a company called Culture Pro. And basically, I like to help people build amazing people processes, hiring, onboarding, communication, delivering actionable building blocks for good organizational culture, and, retention and engagement strategies. So I know that's a lot of HR speak. So I figured I'd build in a slide that explains what those problems sound like on a day-to-day basis. In real talk, you may hear, no one wants to work. I can't find good people to hire. Everybody keeps quitting. Our internal teams don't know how to work together. No one even knows why this initiative is so important. Everybody who is here is quiet quit. Some days I feel like a glorified babysitter. And maybe my personal favorite, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. If any of those problems sound familiar, or you've thought them yourself, or you've commiserated with someone else in the building or at work about that, that's kind of my sweet spot. And so I wanted to just take a minute to explain that. And with that being said, we're going to talk about some pretty fun stuff today. So on the agenda, I'm going to be talking about hard conversations. I'm going to follow this flow. And in my experience, these sorts of things work best with engagement, with thoughtful questions. I grew up in the 90s in AOL chat rooms, so I still love a chat room. If you don't want to speak up on the call, feel free to just drop your thoughts or comments or questions into the chat. I'm keeping an eye on it, and I will bird dog it and answer it, and we'll kind of build it into the flow and keep going. Or I've saved lots of time at the end of this discussion for conversation and questions as well. So, with that being said, hard conversations happen in every single area of our lives. It is a big work issue, but it's also a big personal issue. If you have a spouse, children, roommates, landlords, credit card companies, mortgage banking people, financial advisors, if you have coworkers, if you have brothers and sisters, if you have aging parents, you are surrounded by opportunities to have hard conversations. And because of that, you'd think we would all be experts at it, right? But for whatever reason, we all tend to avoid them at all costs, especially if the relationship we have with that person is important to us. It can be risky to have a hard conversation. And what that looks like, I'm just trying to get my mouse to cooperate here, is there's a lot of reasons that kind of keep us from wanting to jump into that. The biggest one is just fear of the unknown. Oh, I should have started with this. I will be dropping 4-letter words on this call. I will be dropping 4-letter F words. Fear is the first one. So I don't know what you were thinking. It's nothing that bad. But we're going to talk about things like fear and feelings and anxiety and all that fun stuff today. So that was my trigger warning. But a big reason that we don't like to have hard conversations with people is that we just don't know how it's going to go. And that one thing alone is enough to keep us from even opening the can of worms. But there's also other things in play. If you're in a work environment and you need to have a tough conversation with someone that you work for or someone above you in an organization or even a peer, you may be worried about retaliation. They may think that I'm out to get them after this. They may come back at me for something. Or you may be worried about damaging the relationship. And that's a really common concern is how do I do this without making it worse? How can I have this conversation and still pal around with this person after we've worked through it? It can absolutely be done. Now, what happens when we don't have the conversations? I feel like we've all witnessed these things from time to time. But negative emotions tend to fester and can build up. Plot twist, the issue continues. If there is a thing that we need to talk about and no one else knows it's a problem except for me, and I'm not saying anything, believe it will continue to happen because the other person's just living their best life over there, having no idea that it is affecting me the way that it is, right? People start making assumptions. You know, not every problem is obvious to everyone, but if it is obvious to you, you sometimes forget that. And so you start thinking like, how could they let this happen? This just keeps going on and on. I wonder why. It must be because they're friends. I saw them leaving to go to lunch together the other day. I guess that's why this person's just allowed to get away with anything. And those are kind of like the lies we tell ourselves, right? On the work side of it, turnover happens. And, as the person who is in the room for a lot of that over the years, I can tell you that you're almost never losing the person that you'd like to lose. If you're getting turnover from problems like this, it's almost always the ones that had you had the opportunity to choose, you probably would have rather have kept them. Good people don't want to deal with all that at work, right? And then in its fully realized form, you can certainly have productivity drops, fighting, aggression, backbiting, sabotage, all of those nasty things that really could have been circumvented by just talking through it up front. And all of this adds up to, of course, our culture really paying the ultimate price. And then we get into some of those problems that you have to hire me to fix. So, in the world of conflict resolution, there are actually several types of tough talks, but we're only going to really get into one, the big one, and that is called the what happened conversation. Now, I didn't make up these names, okay? So the what happened conversation is literally when people are fighting about what happened. And it's typically because they're operating from two different sets of information. So keep that in mind as we go through this today. I'm going to present to you what I call a tale of two coworkers. And I modified it a little bit for landscaping. And so if I got the jargon or some of the titles wrong, please forgive me. I did my best. All right. So there is a landscaping office somewhere out in the world called Green Thumb. And you've got some tension between two people in particular who just attended a client meeting together. So I want you to keep that in mind. Lily is the salesperson and Jack is the operations manager. And they sat in the same meeting with the same client at the same time. And then now they're discussing some takeaways from the meeting afterward. And they started having a conflict because they remembered very different things from the meeting. Lily is advocating to Jack for a very ambitious design. She wants aesthetic appeal. She's got all of her notes and kind of jotted down some things that the client explicitly said to support her position of wanting a very ambitious look and feel for their revamped garden. Jack, on the other hand, is kind of like, that's not what I heard. He heard the client's focus about practicality and cost. So his response to Lily is, well, we really need to make sure that we're efficiently using resources. We've got timelines. You know, they've got some events at the end of the year that this could bump up against. And I remember them saying that they were looking for something pragmatic and easy to maintain. And as the discussion escalates, it pretty much devolves into Jack is being accused of hindering creativity and not listening to the client. And then Jack feels like Lily is just completely unrealistic and overlooking the logistical challenges of this revamp. So that being the situation, I'd like for you to drop in the chat who's right. I am asking you to pick a side. I'm going to pull up my chat window just so I can see where everybody's landing. If you were Team Lily, the salesperson, or Team Jack, the operations manager. I've got a couple of people sending them to me privately, and I'm seeing two Team Jacks. I have one Team Lily so far. You can drop it to everyone, or you can send it to me. Totally fine either way. Oh, we've definitely got some Team Lilies in the chat. Ooh, Bridget, I like where you're going with this. Yeah, you can pick that they're both right, because guess what? I think they are. I think they are both right. And this is the crux of what happens in a what happened conversation. You have two different people coming in with this assumption that only one of us can be right. And so that means you're full of it, because we all know that we're the person who's always correct in these situations. And it's tricky because when we have details and facts that align to our perspective, it kind of tricks our brain into thinking that the other person surely has misunderstood. You know, it's not always a malicious thing. I'm from the Southeast, so this is where I would typically do oh, bless their heart, you know, they're getting some of those details wrong, but they don't always get it wrong. It's that we're coming at these things with two different perspectives and sets of experiences. So before I continue, has anyone on this call had a situation like this happen to them or a conversation like this? I hope it's not just me. Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, like, these are things that happen to all of us all the time. With the daycare directors, with the school teachers, with the colleagues, with our coworkers, with our boss. Oh, HOA meetings, those are especially fun. This is just kind of the things that happen. And so I wanted to dig into a little bit of the why behind it. So I mentioned earlier the two sets of facts. Our brain is built for shortcuts, but it tricks us sometimes, because the more facts that I have to support my point, the more I can be convinced that your facts are not accurate, or that you're just plain out misinformed or wrong. Maybe we're interpreting the same information just differently. Because again, in Lily and Jack's case, they they have two very different jobs within the company, and their work and the work that they do with the client changes how they interpret the information that they hear. It's not their fault. We all have this. Another thing that happens is that sometimes one of us is just lacking a critical piece of context that the other person picked up on. It doesn't mean it's anything bad or ill-intended. One of us just truly may have missed something. And then the other piece that I wanted to point out is that sometimes there's just disagreement on which piece is kind of like the most important piece. And so in the example, Lily felt like the aesthetics and that wow factor was the most important fact. Whereas Jack was like, I heard easy to maintain, and all of these grand plans that you were talking about are not going to meet that criteria. And he felt that was the most important piece. So I want to give the powerful reframe for this. When you're in a situation like this and you find yourself going, but that's not what I heard. No, that's not what they meant, or that's not what was said. I want you to stop and think, what if we're both right? I wonder why we see this differently. Be curious. And so when I boil this thought pattern down to 2 words, on the left side, it's certainty. I'm coming into this with the red receipts and the email copies, and I've underlined and highlighted the things that underscore my point. And now I've found that whenever I find myself wanting to do that, I need to slow down and I need to stop trying to sell my point and start listening with curiosity, because that's what's going to help me navigate this whole conversation better. Is I have to stop and entertain that. Hold on, why do we see this differently? Let me be curious about this and let me listen to understand. Now, there is another thing that tends to happen in a what happened conversation. And I like to call this story a tale of jumping to conclusions. So a couple years ago, actually a few years ago now, I was asked to work with a department of women who had initially I think they had good relationships with each other at one point, but it had just gone sideways over time, and they were all treating each other terribly. And so it wasn't, they weren't doing this outside of their own team. So everybody would put on the fake smile and act like it was sunshine and rainbows with other departments within the company. But internally within their own team, they were just being awful to one another. Backbiting, gossiping, just jumping to conclusions about who meant what they said when they said what they did, and all of this stuff. And the manager, when she asked me to come into the situation, she had tried to work through this unsuccessfully, and she was just sick of it. She's like, I'm just ready to fire them all. I'll just cover the work myself, and I'll just start over because I can't handle this anymore. It's causing her a lot of stress and strife and babysitting. So as I listened, I started doing what I do and just talking with each of them, collecting information, asking questions. What it really boiled down to is there was one woman in the company who was just kind of like direct, and she just had a very straightforward, a little mean sometimes way of speaking. And then there was another woman in the group who was just from another country altogether, really nice, but neither one of them were really like terrific communicators. And apparently what started the whole thing was one woman had been giving the other woman instruction and left some information out. Not on purpose. She just wasn't a good communicator. But the other lady said, but she did do it on purpose. She knew I would need to know that. Anybody would know that I needed that information. And it made me look stupid in front of all these other people. And it was on purpose. I know it was. I'm like, okay, what data and evidence do you have to support that? Well, because she was the only person who also didn't congratulate me when I had became the lead, and I'm just going, wow, okay, this is getting intense. Have you ever had a situation like this? We are, as human beings, terrible at predicting other people's motives and intentions. But guess what? That doesn't stop us. We do it all the time. We're always taking a thing and then extrapolating what they really meant when they did that or said that or omitted that. When someone says or does something to upset us, it's very easy for us to confuse that feeling in that moment with an intention. So let me talk about what that means for a second. We make assumptions about things based on how we felt in that situation. Here's a positive example. I'm working hard at my desk one afternoon, and my coworker walks by with 2 donuts and hands me one. Oh my gosh, I feel wonderful. They thought of me. How sweet. How did they know I skipped lunch? He had no idea, but he brought me a donut anyway. That must mean that they think highly of me or that they were being considerate. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean any of that. I don't know what it actually means, but I will assign a good intention to that behavior because it made me feel good. On the other hand, if I'm working hard and I get maybe there's a promotion announced and one person doesn't congratulate me, well, that doesn't make me feel good. I may feel ignored or invalidated. And maybe I might start telling myself that they think I didn't deserve it. Well, maybe they missed the email. We tend to take our feeling and then assign an intention that matches the feeling. So if the feeling is positive, it's a positive intention. If the feeling is negative, it's a negative intention. And guess what? We're almost always wrong. Either way, we're no better at predicting positive intentions than we are negative. And in the story of the donut, for all I really know, maybe somebody pawned those donuts off on him and he didn't want to have to eat them both. And so his main goal was to offload one of them on the very first person he ran into. It may have had nothing to do with me at all. And so that's what we have to carry into conversations like this. It's also important to know that we tend to think the best of ourselves and the worst of everyone else. And that's not always true either. So the last thing I wanted to talk about on this one is if I have good intentions, then sometimes I may think that means you shouldn't be upset with me. Well, I didn't mean to. Well, oh, what? You thought I meant that? No. And now I really want you to just drop it and be happy again, because after all, that wasn't my intention. But we need to realize that in the world of conflict and feelings and emotions, like it doesn't always happen that way. So here is the powerful reframe for this. Stop worrying about the intention or the motive. Focus on the impact. Focus on the impact that the situation brings. So that works 2 ways. If I was the person in my feelings about something because I've been slighted or someone made me feel upset, instead of me assuming and accusing them of doing it on purpose or having some ill intent, that's not going to be a productive conversation. What will be more productive is that I focus on how it affected me. I can say, hey, I don't want to make an assumption about this, but after this happened, I felt bad. I felt unseen. I felt like maybe you thought I didn't deserve it. And I wanted to talk to you about it because I value our relationship. And if they are the person who is feeling some kind of way and you're the person who caused it, then instead of jumping into the, oh, I would never do that. That was absolutely not my intention. Problem solved. We must all be good friends again and happy. You can say, whoa, I had no idea this impacted you that way. Just that little statement can make someone feel seen and heard in that moment versus saying, but that's not what I meant to do at all, because that's not really acknowledging that you still had an effect on them, even if it was unintentional. And so to me, the keywords for this are intention versus impact. And we can replace these things in having hard conversations with others so that the conversation is more productive. Now, I've just been zipping through this. Is everybody able to hear me okay? Like, is my connection good? Because someone said they had a hard, I must have frozen for just a second. Am I Good to
Yeah,
go?
everything's good. Everything's good.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So, have you ever had someone assume your intentions? Has anyone been in this situation? And if so, you can just say yes or no. But if you're a yes, could you take a moment and just talk about or drop the one word emotion that you felt in that moment? Happy, sad, offended, angry. And that's going to give me time to take a quick sip of my drink. As someone who I think I'm a very nice person, I don't walk around kicking puppies or anything, you know. I definitely don't like it when someone thinks the worst of me, and it's definitely has happened to me before. Now, thank you, Robert. The last piece that I wanted to talk about, this is the third common thought pattern in what happened conversations. Now, I made this one about a couple, but it could be any two people, right? And this is something I think, especially in the world that we live in, happens all the time. Imagine you're on a road trip and there's two of you in the car. Someone's driving and someone is not driving. And at some point, the person not driving realizes either we've gone in a wrong direction, we've taken a wrong turn. Maybe there was a faster way. I can't tell you how many faster way conversations I have had when traveling with people for work. You should have taken the 301. Like, oh, and in that moment, I feel like I'm being blamed because now we're sort of off track. Maybe we're stuck in traffic. Maybe there's an accident. Or you can replace road tripping with laundry or household chores. I asked you to do the dishes. Why aren't the dishes done? You said you were going to get the trash taken out. You didn't. Now the house smells. And so we assign blame in our day-to-day language without even really thinking about it. We all have a need sometimes, depending on the situation, to remove ourselves from fault, right? Let's talk about why that is and what happens there. Well, we kind of live in a society that thrives on blame. And by focusing on blame, it actually inhibits our ability to talk about the root cause of the problem. Blame discussions are very unproductive because it prevents us from taking the meaningful steps to keep it from happening again. If I get to focus on the blame, then I don't necessarily have to address the bigger issue. And if I assign blame, sometimes it also means that I'm stepping away from helping fix it, and that's not good either. The other piece that I wanted to bring up is that blame implies punishment. Whether or not there is a punishment in play, that is sort of where people go. And so when the idea of punishment is present in a conversation, people immediately are less forthcoming, they are less open, and they are less willing to apologize for fear of punishment. So as leaders, it's important for us to be aware of that when we're having our conversations with others. Why does this happen? Consequences. We already talked about punishment, right? Also, people don't like being wrong. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. We want to clear our own name. I want everybody to know that that wasn't my screw up. But the other thing sometimes is poor emotional regulation. We don't all have the ability to sit comfortably with accountability. Everybody's on a different journey with that. And then for some people, it is just a natural defense mechanism that they want to make sure, like, the rest of the room is like, we know it's not your fault, but they feel the need to kind of say it. I didn't do this, like, I just want you guys to know. Okay, yeah, we get it. But what if there was a different way to have this conversation? Knowing that blame is unproductive. What if we focused on contribution instead? I have not seen too many problems in business that truly boil to one person. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. And certainly Sheila isn't saying that that this means we don't hold people accountable, because that's different, right? But oftentimes in a problem, there are multiple contributing factors. And do I have any history buffs in here? I don't know if anyone has watched, there was a series on HBO about Chernobyl. And watching, it was a case study of what happens when people aren't comfortable speaking up and pointing out problems as they encounter it. But when you're in a place and everyone is just sort of like saying, not my job is to look at this and do this one thing, and I don't have to worry about all this. That's kind of what happened in the Chernobyl disaster, is you had all these people that were seeing things, but nobody wanted to talk about it. And then after this huge disaster happened, they were absolutely ready to find one person to pin the whole thing on, and it was that person's fault. And so instead of doing all of that, because it doesn't help, it's better to say, you know what? I don't want to blame you, and I don't want to blame myself, because I do feel like there were a lot of contributions to this. And the contribution I made was that when you tried to tell me about it, I wasn't listening closely. Or the contribution that I made was, you know what? I could have prepared you better to handle these situations when they come up. And the contribution you made was that you probably could have told me a little bit sooner, and that's okay. That's okay. But if we don't talk about the steps and the facts and the things that led us to this point, it's going to be that much harder to fix it and keep it from happening again. It's better to acknowledge everyone's contributions. And so that also means not just saying, well, I don't want to blame you, but here's how you contributed to this problem, and then not mentioning anybody else's, right? That's not how it goes. It's better to just put it all out on the table and then have a very productive discussion around what can we do to move past this and kind of checks and balances some of these things going forward. So has anyone ever been blamed for anything on this call, or just me? As a mom, I feel like I get blamed for everything. But of course, if you asked my son, who's 9, he would also feel like he gets blamed for everything. Thank you, Nicholas. Never. Yeah, I love it. So I asked the questions about this for each point because it just sort of underscores that this is an area that you could use this tool. You can use this reframe. If you've ever been blamed for something, it's a great way to say, you know what? I did contribute to this. I did. I think, though, in all fairness, there were other contributions in play. I would love to have a more full discussion around all of that so that I can now help make sure it doesn't happen going forward. And so that's how, if we're the blamee, we can still use this reframe to help us get through those conversations, even if our partner or the other person involved in the conversation isn't aware of the reframe. Now, I've talked a lot about what to look for and how to recognize hard conversations, what happened conversations. But I told Robert that I was also going to share a framework to help you get through and plan a conversation. Usually when I give this talk, there are people on this phone call who are absolutely putting off a hard conversation that they need to have in some area of their life. And so this framework is for you, but it's also for the rest of us. So I built a framework called TEAM, because in a conversation, it takes two. And if you go into it with the idea that you're on the same team, it'll help you kind of keep the goal in mind at the end. So let's go through this really quickly, and then we'll open it up for questions and thoughts and comments. The T in TEAM stands for thoroughly prepare. That means you want to gather some information, plan what you want to talk about, think about how they will react. When I say know your goal, I mean, what do you want to change as a result of the conversation? You won't be able to move toward a resolution if you don't clearly define your goal of the conversation up front. And do think about the timing and the place when you go to have whatever talk you need to have. It's important. The timing and the place is most important, and you don't want to rush it. There we go. Come on. Next slide. All right. The E in TEAM just stands for empathize. Empathize, and I like to say express the common goals. So When we talk about being empathetic, it's not sympathetic. It's being understanding. It's listening without rushing into your response. When I have a hard conversation with someone, I intentionally pace myself. And every time the other person finishes speaking, I just sit there for a couple seconds of silence. It's a great way for you to control the pace of the conversation to just a second or two. It doesn't have to be long. And then I respond. I'm careful to describe my thoughts and feelings. I'm not here to assign assumptions to the other person. I'm just going to talk about how it affected me, how it impacted me, what I experienced. And then I'm going to ask for theirs. And the important piece here is to remember that you're on the same team. You're in the same family. Come on, we're a family. And you explicitly state those things. Bring out the things that bind the two of you together. And sometimes you have to go like, we're on this earth together. Go big if you have to. There's always something that you have in common with this other person that you want to use during this time to help underscore that you want to work together better or solve the problem. The A in team just means address the issue constructively, meaning encourage a two-way conversation and be very clear and specific. This isn't the time to show your high vocabulary score from the GRE or your SATs. Like, you don't need big words and fancy language. Research shows us that the simpler language we use, the easier it is for other people to process it. And so that's important in a hard conversation, because when we're not clear and we're not specific, then it lends to people not remembering the whole thing or making up their own narrative as to what we meant, right? And that's what we're trying to avoid. Of course, be respectful. And then you'll see that I talk about facts and evidence and dialogue, and that carries through for this to this piece as well, is to try and focus on the things that really happen, not the things we think that happen. And then in order to move forward, you have to intentionally move the conversation to resolution. So how do you do that? Well, it starts with preparing and having a goal. And that's why that's important to understand what is the thing I'm wanting to achieve by taking on this work. And then brainstorming together, involving the other person in this process, agreeing on action steps, summarizing it. Okay, here's what I heard. It doesn't mean it's a gotcha moment. I want to make sure that I got everything that we intended to get from this. Here's what I heard. And then schedule the follow-up. I have been in so many rooms where they're like, oh no, I talked to them. I did. But if you're not following up, you're signaling that it's not important, even though it is important to you, but you have to follow up. The act of the follow-up underscores that it's important enough to have one more conversation or meeting about this later, so that we can make sure that we are following the commitment that we're making today. And when I'm having that hard conversation, if there are actions required, I want a verbal commitment. I'm going to say, okay, here's what we've agreed to. Are you in? I'm in, and I will give a verbal commitment. And that's going to help set the tone for, okay, like, she's serious about this. We're serious about this. We're going to do it. And then we do the follow-up, whether it's in a few days or a week. Now, I knew we were recording, so I built a recap slide because no one's going to want to have to watch a full training again to get a tip or a tap. But if you zip to the end of this, you can screen cap the recap and you'll have the gist of today's presentation. So hard conversations are part of everyday life. I think we should all embrace and lean into these opportunities because it can deepen our relationships, not harm the relationships. And I've put in just a high level summary of certainty versus curiosity, intention versus impact, and blame versus contribution. And I'd love to help you solve any of these problems, or if you just have feedback or questions for me about having tough conversations at work, feel free to reach out. I love talking about this stuff. And I hope that today was a valuable use of your time. And Robert, I don't know how you guys do the Q&A, But if anyone has questions, I'm certainly here for it, or comments or discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. Yeah, you can either put your question into chat, you could come off your mic and go live, open to all the options. But that was a great presentation. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
And don't all be shy and ask your questions at once.
Thank you, Bridget.
Bridget, do you have any, you don't have any tough conversations or issues with people, do you? I'll pick on a few people.
Yeah, no, not at all. Sheila, do you have any key words that you use in those conversations that soften
Hmm?
those topics possibly?
I do. What I try to keep in mind is, and I carry this into termination conversations. You know, I carry this into, hey, you're not doing well. If we don't see improvement, we're going to need to exit you from the company. I sort of look at it like I can say and have tough conversations with someone, and as long as my goal is to leave them with their dignity and treat them like a person and respect them like another human being, even if the outcome isn't what they wanted, they will respect the conversation. A lot of people are more upset that no one will talk to them about it. And I think sometimes in business, especially, that gets overlooked because, again, everybody is worried about how it's going to go or worried about the outcome. And then meanwhile, you have this person who is struggling, right? I mean, when someone's not doing, and I'm going to make this about job performance for a second, but when someone's not doing well at work, guess who knows? They do. They do. You know when you're not doing something well, and it doesn't feel good. And I think sometimes, you know, the person in that position, they don't know how to ask for a lifeline, or they may feel like their boss is too busy to help them, or I can't let them know I'm struggling because then they may, you know, they may lose faith in me. And it's, you know, I always call it the lies we tell ourselves. And so when I have to sit down with someone and talk to them about that, the first thing I want to know is, hey, how are you doing? How have things been going lately? And I open it up because, again, I only know 5 to 7% of that person's life right now, right? I know a very small piece of it. There could be bigger, more important things happening that they haven't let on at all to anyone. And it's important to me that I open the door and hear. Sometimes they're like, yeah, it's going good. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I noticed something last week and it's not like you. And so I thought we should just sit down and talk about it. And so what I'm using there are we, us, I noticed, you know, I don't come into these things super formal. Whenever the HR lady is sitting down to talk with someone, they are already worried that they're going to get fired. even even in promotion conversations, you get called down into HR and the first thing someone's thinking is, I am in trouble. Oh my gosh, I'm about to lose my job. And so it's important to me to make a very comfortable environment right from the beginning. And sometimes, like if the environment, maybe there have been layoffs, I will start with that. Hey, you're not losing your job right now. Okay. And I want you to know that because I know how it feels when you get called into this office. And so you're not losing your job. I noticed something this week and I just thought we could have a quick conversation about it so I could help you if you need it. That's it. And so that beginning of a hard conversation, when you kind of frame it that way, doesn't actually sound that hard anymore. And so that's what I've learned to do over the years is just use friendly language. And I lean into the relationships that I've built with people. You know, hey, you know, I care about your path here. And I was in a meeting with you last week, and I noticed you kept talking over the so and so. And that was so not like you because when I think about conversations that you and I have had, I don't really feel like you ever talk over me. Was everything okay that day? And so now I'm bringing up potentially something that is tough to talk about, right? Man, this person's rude. They're always talking over other people in the meeting. But I'm framing it in such a way that I can say it, I can still get the message across and that I've noticed it. And then I'm going to see like, how can I help them with that? Pam's got a question. How do you suggest we encourage someone? Yeah. I hold them accountable. So, I get, asked a lot for, Sheila, can I just run this situation? I just need to vent. I'm like, okay, well, you can vent. This is a safe space to vent. But if I start to hear that an action is needed, at the end of that conversation, I may say, okay, Pam, you've had a safe space to vent. But as your colleague and friend, I'm now going to ask you to figure out how you want to go about correcting this. And if you need some tools from me to have this conversation, I'm here for it. But let's set a timeline and goal because this isn't going to get better on its own. And I don't want to know that you're going to be struggling and dealing with this for 3 more weeks on end. I want to make sure that you still enjoy your job here. The only way you're going to get to that is to be able to talk through it. Let's put a plan together. And so I'm not going to force them. And arguably in some roles I could, but I have found that it's better to kind of ease someone toward that and then give them that space they've vented to then tell me why they're afraid to do it. You know what I mean? Because it's going to go back to fear of outcome, fear of retaliation. It's always a common source of 5 or 6 different reasons. And once I can uncover that, then I can kind of help get them past that fear and say, you can practice with me. I do a lot of role playing too, with people so that it kind of takes we always think that some awful thing is going to happen. And then when you role play through it and you talk through it, you're like, oh, yeah, that really wasn't that bad. I hope that was helpful. That was a great question. Thank you.
Thank you. It is. Essentially go back to reassure them of those 5 or so essential fears that you may have about having the conversation. So,
Yeah. And today, I think too, there's so much anxiety and pressure on offending people and hurting their feelings and this and that. And we all you can get distracted with all of that noise and forget that regardless of whether you're in a landscaping company, a business consulting company, a manufacturing company, we're all people. We all have the same problems and concerns in our life. And so to me, if we can remember that, it gets a lot easier after that because I'm going to be able to pull that in and use that as a tool to connect me to that person,
Hey, Sheila, I have a question for you. What's your thoughts on when you talk about time and place? When I tried to arrange a meeting with one of my employees, especially with HR involved, the immediate question is, what this about? They're back, they get really defensive. And what's your thoughts on almost framing that meeting? Hey, I want to bring you in to talk about this topic, just so they have almost like can be prepared.
Sure.
For that meeting.
So there's a couple of ways that I will advise a hiring manager or a people manager of how to kind of walk through this, because I think first, anytime there's an HR person on the call, that whoever is they're either going to start applying jobs, they're going to get scared. And so again, even though you're not meaning to, like, it's important to have that representation, it implies punishment. And so I always tell people, I recommend you as their manager reach out and say, hey, I wanted to give you some feedback. And I've invited so-and-so HR person on the call with us, but you're not losing your job. This is where I kind of go into a little bit of preemptive damage control, as long as they're not losing their job. You're not losing your job. I've asked them to attend the call just so that I can have a third party on to make sure that I'm doing and saying what I need to say correctly. Sometimes I take on the responsibility. I'm bringing this person on to support me in this space. And because you may have questions that I am not the best person to answer, and I may defer to so-and-so. But I'm not firing you. You're not losing your job. I just want to make sure that we can have a constructive conversation and I can give you this feedback well. And if you've got questions, I've got everybody there who can help you answer it. And so it's a little bit of a word game. Now, if someone's losing their job and it is like a termination situation, I typically don't put HR on there. And they've got the time, they have it on their calendar, but I don't have them on that meeting invite, because I can't reach out in advance and offer those condolences. And it also wouldn't make sense for me to say, hey, I'm going to fire you tomorrow. You know what I like? And so I wouldn't include HR, but then when everyone gets on the call, of course, the HR person is there.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Cool. Thank you, Sheila.
Nope. Tough question, but a good one.
Anybody else? Let's see here. There's another question. Got some few thank yous. Anybody else? Doug, Nicholas, Sarah, anybody have any final questions? We've got a couple minutes left, but this has been great information so far.
Thank you. And I really appreciate everybody's participation in the chat. It makes it a little bit easier when I can play off of what you guys are saying and asking. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's finish things up here. I'd love to get your contact information up on here. I don't know whether you have that to Sheila or
do.
whether Arvin. There we are. There we are. Perfect.
Look at Art. He is on top of it. Thank you so much, Arvin.
So this is how you can contact Sheila directly. Again, she's been a wonderful topic here, explained things really well. So reach out to Sheila and help with her new business. But yeah, thank you, Sheila, for your time today. I know you're a busy person, and but your wealth of knowledge. So that is her contact information for Sheila.
Okay. Happy to do it.
Cool. And then just so you know, next month we have Carlos Del Pozo. He's from Team Engine. He's going to be talking about recruitment strategies and streamlining the hiring journey. So it's May 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We will have the registration page up here shortly, but just let's do a save the date for May 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And if anybody wants to stay on, talk about peer groups, virtual peer groups, any of our other services, happy to stick around for a bit. But really appreciate everybody joining us today. We have recorded this. We will send this out to all of you that were on the call, those of you who registered. And from there, we'll part ways, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Great talking with you. Robert will be in touch. Take care.
Yep. Thank you, Sheila. Take care.
Thank you.